You'll hear with the sailing vessel Dream Chaser. And in last week's episode, we went ahead and showed you how we started to remove all the screws from the teak deck where we pulled the teak up off of the Formosa, right here behind me. Kind of took a few different next steps. What I noticed is underneath the teak boards there was like a almost like an adhesive, an epoxy adhesive or fiberglass resin type material that looks like it was laid down on the deck and then the teak was laid into it. Almost like grout with tile, if you want to think about it that way. So when I pulled the teak up, you could see these little offset lines where the teak had set down inside of it. But you could clearly see where each board was, and it is not a smooth surface. And some of it was flaking a little bit. So in this episode, I'm going to start by showing what I initially did, and that was using an oscillated scraper and basically scraping that off to the fiberglass. This stuff was, anywhere from non-existent up to, let's say, 1/8 of an inch thick or so, maybe a little bit more, maybe 3/16.
The next step here is I'm going to actually do a little scraping on the deck of the boat. I like these fine type tools or oscillating tools. Got a bit of an offset scraper and a flat blade scraper. It's a little more rigid. We're going to go ahead and give those a shot. If I have one I've used before, I'll start with that one. Here we go.
Hey everybody, I want to interrupt the video for just a second and ask for you to do us a favor. Please do us a favor and go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Click on the like button, the thumbs up just below this video, and please do share it with your friends. Well, after doing this small section, I realized this probably isn't the best way of doing this. I started noticing that I was getting it fairly smooth, but I was taking a lot of this rigid material off. And since I'm going to cover the whole thing with fiberglass anyway, what I really want is a smooth surface. So instead, I'm now looking at, I'm going to try sanding the peaks down and then using a thickened epoxy and essentially a fairing trowel, if you will, to fair it smooth. I think that might be a better approach, so I'm gonna shift gears a little bit and go to sanding rather than chipping all of this off of here. I think it might be a little easier to do. So the only sander I have is actually a small 5-inch palm orbital sander. Just didn't expect that was going to be enough for the type of work that we needed. I needed something a lot more aggressive. I'm not a huge fan of Harbor Freight tools for quality, but when I'm doing jobs that I sort of view as disposable, I have no issue with doing it. In this case, I went over to Harbor Freight. I bought a belt sander. I think it was $30 with their coupon and discount of $25. I figure if I can get this deck sanded, that's a good disposable tool. That's more than enough. So I'm using a 36 grit sandpaper on this, and you can really see those ridges that I was referring to earlier where the teak deck had come up. So you can see the theory here. I'm trying to remove these peaks. This is working a lot better than the chipping off. It's actually a lot faster. So sanding this deck's actually a lot of work. It's a little rough on the knees. You kind of down on your hands and knees for a while. but surprisingly it's not taken nearly as long as I thought it was going to. So I sanded on the deck here for about an hour and a half or so with that 36 grit sandpaper, and you know, I'm still sweeping up quite a bit of dust right here, but it also has a small bag that kind of catches the dust on the back of the sander, and I filled that bag up 2 different times too. I think about as big as a large coffee can full of this really fine, pure fiberglass and epoxy dust. I saved some of it. I might be able to use it as a filler when I need to thicken some of the epoxy. I'm not sure about that, so I just have it there just in case. But you can see it looks fairly good. Now, it's not completely smooth. You can still see the lighter white spots are where I sanded down, and those darker spots are still a little bit of a void down below. But the thought here is I'll be able to use a thickened epoxy and fare that smooth before I then lay another layer of fiberglass mat cloth and epoxy over that. So it's at this point in all of the work that I'm doing that I happen to see a post on a Facebook forum that I'm part of called the Leaky Tiki Yacht Forum. Here's where I got some concerning guidance. Somebody basically, a shipwright, been doing this 30 or 40 years, and essentially said, you know, a good rule of thumb is if it's screwed together on the boat, it's part of the structural integrity. So if you remove the teak from the top of the deck, you're essentially removing part of the structural integrity of that deck. Even though it's cored fiberglass below it, the reality is that teak, according to this person, is designed to help keep the sides, so it keeps the whole deck rigid, and it keeps the sides of the hull from flexing inbound. And in some cases, he showed examples of other boats he'd seen where from that flexing, you started to see detabbing of some of the bulkheads and some of the floor stringers. So this was enough to send me into a bit of a mental tailspin for about 5 days this week, while I went back and forth talking to these guys around, what now? I mean, I've ripped teak off of 1/3 of the total deck, and so it looks like there is still hope. You know, the good news is it's not like I did this 6 years ago and it's been slowly sagging the deck over time. And I do believe it is still a very strong deck. I mean, I've got between the core and the 2 layers of fiberglass, I have over an inch thick deck, which is very sturdy. But I don't want to take any chances here either. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put down about another 1/2 inch thick of fiberglass mat and epoxy resin over the deck when I get the whole thing sanded down. And just to make sure I don't run into any problems, as I start to remove the teak deck next to the coach house, I am putting some 2x4 supports up underneath the lower part of the deck. So if you think about it, you got the hull here, you got the deck, and then you have the coach house. So from the part of the deck, and then the coach house sits like this. Right under this section, we want to keep that from sagging downward with the teak coming off of this portion of the deck here, right here. So I put some 2x4s that essentially go from the edge where this coach house attaches, from the edge here down to the base of the hull. In this case, I just did it right to the floorboard in the galley, but I have some of those there to add some support. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. There were a lot of opinions on this. I mean, some people, there were two specific people that said they were both shipwrights and said absolutely teak is part of the structural integrity of the boat, and you shouldn't remove it without re-strengthening the deck. There were also a host of people who said, hey, listen, I've had this boat for X number of years since then. I've never had an issue with it. We've removed all the teak decks and basically just, put a layer of fiberglass down to smooth it, faired it, and put the non-skid on it. I'm aware of several of these boats sailing in different parts of the world that have the exact same thing, so the teak decks were removed. And those boats are fine as well. So I think this really comes down to what's the quality of the core and how strong is that core. As you saw in the last video, I believe our core is hardwood. Now I'm going to do a bigger access panel at some point here in the next couple of weeks to see if that's true or not. It's a little hard to tell by these 2-inch exploratory holes, but I think I'll cut about a 1.5 by foot long swath of top layer of fiberglass off of the deck so I can really see what that core looks like. And if it's hardwood core, my concerns go from here to all the way down really low. Because honestly, if it's a hardwood core, then this thing has plenty of rigidity and I don't have to worry about that. Until next time. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for weekly updates and like this video.